Pascal, a philosopher whom we both love, has said, how truly, que tout notre raisonnement se réduit à céder au sentiment. And it is not impossible that the sentiment of the natural, had time permitted it, would have regained its old ascendancy over the harsh mathematical reason of the schools. But this thing was not to be. Prematurely induced by the intemperance of knowledge, the old age of the world drew on. This the mass of mankind saw not, or, living lustily, although unhappily, affected not to see. But for myself, the earth's records had taught me to look for widest ruin as the price of highest civilization. I had imbibed a prescience of our fate from comparison of China, the simple and enduring, with Assyria, the architect, with Egypt, the astrologer, with Nubia, more crafty than either, the turbulent mother of all arts. In history, these regions I met with a ray from the future. The individual artificialities of the three latter were local diseases of the earth, and in their individual overthrows we had seen local remedies applied. But for the infected world at large, I could anticipate no regeneration save in death. That man, as a race, should not become extinct. I saw that he must be born again. And now it was, fairest and dearest, that we wrapped our spirits daily in dreams. Now it was that in twilight we discoursed of the days to come, when the art-scarred surface of the earth, having undergone that purification which alone could efface its rectangular obscenities, should clothe itself anew in the verdure and the mountain slopes and the smiling waters of paradise, and be rendered at length a fit dwelling place for man the death purged, for man to whose now exalted intellect there should be poison in knowledge no more, for the redeemed, regenerated, blissful, and now immortal, but still for the material man. Una. Well do I remember these conversations, dear Monos, but the epoch of the fiery overthrow was not so near at hand as we believed, and as the corruption you indicate did surely warrant us in believing. Men lived and died individually. You yourself sickened and passed into the grave, and thither your constant Una speedily followed you, and though the century which has since elapsed, and whose conclusion brings us thus together once more, tortured our slumbering senses with no impatience of duration, yet, my Monos, it was a century still. Monos, say, rather, a point in the vague infinity. Unquestionably, it was in the earth's dotage that I died, wearied at heart with anxieties which had their origin in the general turmoil and decay. I succumbed to the fierce fever. After some few days of pain, and many of dreamy delirium, replete with ecstasy, the manifestations of which you mistook for pain, while I longed, but was impotent to undeceive you, after some days there came upon me, as you have said, a breathless and motionless torpor, and this was termed death by those who stood around me. Words are vague things. My condition did not deprive me of sentience. It appeared to me not greatly dissimilar to the extreme quiescence of him, who, having slumbered long and profoundly, lying motionless and fully prostrate in a midsummer noon, begins to steal slowly back into consciousness, through the mere sufficiency of his sleep, and without being awakened by external disturbances. I breathed no longer. The pulses were still. The heart had ceased to beat. Volition had not departed, but was powerless. The senses were unusually active, although eccentrically so, assuming each other's functions at random. The taste and the smell were inextricably confounded, and became one sentiment, abnormal and intense. The rose water with which your tenderness had moistened my lips to the last affected me with sweet fancies of flowers, fantastic flowers, far more lovely than any of the old earth, but whose prototypes we have here blooming around us. The eyelids, transparent and bloodless, offered no complete impediment to vision. As volition was in abeyance, the balls could not roll in their sockets, but all objects within the range of the visual hemisphere were seen with more or less distinctness. The rays which fell upon the external retina, or into the corner of the eye, producing a more vivid effect than those which struck the front or anterior surface, yet in the former instance this effect was so far anomalous that I appreciated it only as sound. Sound, sweet or discordant as the matters presenting themselves at my side were light or dark in shade, curved or angular in outline. The hearing at the same time, although excited in degree, was not irregular in action, estimating real sounds with an extravagance of precision not less than of sensibility. Touch had undergone a modification more peculiar. Its impressions were tardily received, but pertinaciously retained, and resulted always in the highest physical pleasure. Thus the pressure of your sweet fingers upon my eyelids, at first only recognized through vision, at length, long after their removal, filled my whole being with a sensual delight immeasurable. I say, with a sensual delight. All my perceptions were purely sensual. The materials furnished the passive brain by the senses were not in the least degree wrought into shape by the deceased understanding. Of pain there was some little. Of pleasure there was much. But of moral pain or pleasure none at all. Thus your wild sobs floated into my ear with all their mournful cadences, and were appreciated in their every variation of sad tone, but they were soft musical sounds, and no more. They conveyed to the extinct reason no intimation of the sorrows which gave them birth, while the large and constant tears which fell upon my face, telling the bystanders of a heart which broke, thrilled every fibre of my frame with ecstasy alone. And this was, in truth, the death of which these bystanders spoke reverently in low whispers, you, sweet Una, gaspingly, with loud cries. They attired me for the coffin, 3 or 4 dark figures which flitted busily to and fro. As these crossed the direct line of my vision, they affected me as forms, but upon passing to my side, their images impressed me with the idea of shrieks, groans, and other dismal expressions of terror or horror or of woe. You alone, habited in a white robe, passed in all directions musically about me.